Your God is evil. He literally wiped out 99% of the earth with a flood. Yeah, God takes plenty of people's lives. What's the problem with that?
All right, let's see it.
That's literally evil, and all good God wouldn't do that. Evil according to who? What do you mean? That's just obviously evil. Well, no, I don't think it is. Everybody bases their morality on a different thing.
This is incorrect. Everyone's morality is actually based foundationally on the exact same thing, and that would be our evolutionarily and experientially installed intuitions about right and wrong, our feelings. And that foundation then interacts with our socialization, our learned experiences, and our critical reflection, or our reasoning. And that process of negotiation then generates a developed or a systematic morality or moral outlook.
For example, you base your morality on how you feel, but I base my morality on God.
No, you don't. You also base your morality on how you feel. You have just been socialized and conditioned to imagine that God is the one curating that. But ultimately, just like all humans, your morality is founded on evolutionarily and experientially installed intuitions about right and wrong. You would like for your morality to be based on something transcendent and authoritative and objective, and that's simply not the case. There is no such morality. All humans are unfortunately confined to the limits of our cognition, which again build on the foundation of intuitions or feelings.
No, my morality isn't just how I feel. Pretty much all of society would agree that taking someone's life is wrong. Well, that doesn't work either, because in the antebellum South, pretty much all of society agreed that owning and beating slaves was an okay thing to do. Society changes its morality. It's not a trustworthy thing.
So, two problems here. First, that not good enough negotiability of morality is unfortunately the best we can possibly do, because morality will always be negotiable. Now, synchronically, diachronically, we can get very close to absolute unanimity regarding certain moral principles, and so it may feel like they are objective and inviolable and transcendent, but they are not. It is always negotiable. And the example you use brings up the second concern. The Bible does the exact same thing. So your retreat to God as some kind of objective moral standard fails to distinguish itself from the negotiable morality that you reject as not good enough. Now, folks are going to say, no, the Bible protects enslaved folks. It does a better job. No, it doesn't. It allows for the disciplinary beating of slaves just like they did in the pre-Civil War American South. And yes, it places some limits on that, just like they did in the pre-Civil War American South. For instance, we can look at the 1825 Civil Code of the state of Louisiana, and we can look down at Article 173 at the bottom of the page. The slave is entirely subject to the will of his master, who may correct and chastise him, though not with unusual rigor, nor so as to maim or mutilate him, or to expose him to the danger of loss of life, or to cause his death. So this is pretty much the same kind of limit that is placed on the treatment of an enslaved person in the Bible. Now, folks are going to suggest that there was a big difference between the way enslaved folks were treated in the pre-Civil War American South and the way the Bible allowed people to treat enslaved folks. And there's a problem here, and that is that when we look at the way enslaved people were treated in the pre-Civil War American South, we're going based off of reports of what actually happened on the ground rather than on the laws that were on the books, as is the case with the Civil Code of Louisiana. When we look at the Bible, we have pretty much no data regarding the lived experience of enslaved folks. That is to say, what actually happened on the ground. All we have is the stuff that was ostensibly on the books, but most scholars agree that these things were not actually on the books. This is propaganda. This is scribal exercises. This is why many of the law codes in the Hebrew Bible directly contradict each other. They cannot all have been operative together. So we're comparing what happened on the ground in spite of the laws on the books to what wasn't even on the books. in the absence of knowledge of what went on the ground. So you cannot compare these two and suggest one was any better or worse than the other. Pre-Civil War American South slavery was race-based, and that's because European imperialism created the notion of race as a question of skin color, and the chattel slavery that is endorsed in Leviticus 25 verses 44 through 46 is ethnically based, and that precedes the identification of race as a question of skin color. There's really not much distinction to draw between the two types of chattel slavery when we situate them within the time periods and the frameworks that were operative in those time periods. So this is an attempt to say God is better than society, even though God does the exact same thing that society does. And what changed? The consensus. We all decided that we were going to overrule the Bible. We were going to overrule God and say no. Enslavement, the practice of buying, selling, and owning other human beings, is wrong. And there is not a single syllable of the Bible that suggests any such thing whatsoever. That is something that humans came up with precisely because morality is negotiable.
Well, I don't care. I still think wiping out all of humanity is a wrong thing to do. I'd rather burn in hell than spend eternity with a god who would do that. Okay, yeah, then you will. How could you say that? You're disgusting. You literally just said that you would rather go to hell, and if you want that, then God will grant you that wish. Psh, no hate like Christian love.
So this is supposed to be mocking the atheist position that the God of the Bible acts in phenomenally immoral ways. However, all it's really showing is that this person is happy to endorse the notion that they would have no problem with genocide and with murder and with rape and with all these things if God had not told them they're bad. And that's a performance. That's not true. This person without God would still be intuitively compelled to consider those things bad. So one, it's just a performance of this amoral position absent divine command ethics. But two, it's just factually wrong. Divine command ethics are no less negotiable and no less socially contingent than any other brand of morality, because morality is based on either force or consensus. And the folks who argue about divine command ethics are really just taking the consensus view of their in-group and arguing that that's actually founded on something transcendent and objective, when in reality it's based on the same thing that everybody's morality is based on. Again, those evolutionarily and experientially installed intuitions about right and wrong, which, by the way, are usually oriented toward in-group biases, and they interact with socialization, with our learned experiences, and with critical reflection or reasoning. That's what generates, that's what negotiates our moral outlook, our moral frameworks, our moral systems. And there is nothing that transcends that, and certainly not God. And the fit for this video has been Uncanny X-Men 201.